Hey guys, my name is Shane Deering. I'm a 2D animator and illustrator, and I wanted to just make a quick little video about animation in Photoshop. I get a lot of questions about like what kind of software do I use, what tools do I use to make animation. So yeah, I do all of my animation inside Photoshop. It's all hand drawn, frame by frame. Essentially, just traditional pencil and paper animation, but on the computer. Before I get this going, I'd like to just mention that Alex Grigg, who's a fantastic animator, he has a really great tutorial on Photoshop animation that goes way more in depth than what I believe this little video I'm making will go into. His video, I think it was like back in 2015, that's the thing that I saw that actually got me interested in trying to move over to Photoshop. There are a lot of great pieces of animation software out there that are readily available. However, I feel Photoshop is unique in the sense that people use it for illustration and design. And so a program where you can do both those things and animation is very attractive to me because I do a lot of design work and illustration work in Photoshop already. And when I found out like, oh man, you can make things move and you can and make cartoons and animations inside of Photoshop, I was really blown away by that because I remember seeing Alex Grigg's video. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, no one does animation inside of Photoshop. That's crazy. And I guess in a way it kind of is. It is a very unintuitive piece of software for animation. Everything's a little clunky, but if you kind of look past that and practice a little bit, I think you'll find that it's a very powerful tool for making animation. I think its biggest strength is that stylistically you can pull off anything in Photoshop. If you're able to draw it and design it, then you can also make it move. And so having all that wrapped into one piece of software is really nice. You don't have to jump around a lot. So that's really what gave me the push from transitioning. I used to do all of my animation in Flash, and I jumped over to Photoshop a few years ago, and I still use it every day, and I love it. So two quick disclaimers before we get going. This is really meant for people who are already familiar with Photoshop and are comfortable with a lot of the tools that exist inside of it already, like all the drawing functionality and everything. Also, this isn't really this isn't really a tutorial on animation itself, just how you would set up a file and get used to the tools that are available to you in Photoshop to help you do animation. I might do a video later on talking about animation fundamentals and everything like that, but there's so many amazing tutorials and classes and books out there on animation taught by people who know a lot more than I do. I don't consider myself to be in any way an authority on that subject, but regardless, let's just go ahead and jump in here. So I've just got a blank square canvas. I've got my layer block over there. So the first thing that we need to do to start working on an animation in Photoshop is you need to go up to Window and scroll down to Timeline, and then click Create Video Timeline. I didn't even know that this thing existed in Photoshop. So it's pretty mind-blowing to me figuring out that there's like actually a timeline, even though this thing is really, really bad compared to like Flash's timeline or TV Paint's timeline, all the other software out there. This is not very good. It's pretty bare bones. But let's jump into this. When you create the timeline default, it just stretches out your background layer at what seems to be just like an arbitrary length. So to start building your animation, you need to put frames into the timeline. So what were layers over here when you're just normally building a painting or a design file in Photoshop, they're going to become they're become frames in your timeline. So if we want to make a frame, we have to go down here and click New Frame, and it'll stretch it out, unfortunately, all the way to the end of the timeline every single time you want to add a frame. There's nothing you can really do about that at the moment with stock Photoshop. So when you add a new frame, it'll stretch it out, and you got to drag it all the way back down here. And if we compress our timeline here using this slider, we'll see that where it says 101F, since I've stretched this all the way down, the size of this frame or the length of this frame is 1 frame. And so we can stretch that out however many frames we want. It doesn't matter, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So this would be 1 frame. And so if I'll just place a little drawing in here. So if I take this play header thing back, and this thing is just whatever's inside these bounds here of these 2 clips is what's going to play when you press the play button over here. So we have our player here. If I press play, I've got all these extra blank frames here. But if I had 2 frames here, or just 1 frame, this would just loop forever. So whatever's inside these things, it'll just loop and infinitely play over and over again. So this is like your active play area. And over here we have, the play button, which will play it for us. You can also scrub through frame by frame like this. And then this button on the far left takes you to the very beginning of your project. So now, it's not an animation with just 1 frame, so let's go ahead and add another one in here. We're going to press the other frame button. Stretch this thing back down to the left. So now I've got 2 frames, but, they're still vertically like a normal layer, like the normal layer functionality in Photoshop. They're still on top of each other, which is a little confusing. So the way that you get everything to line up is this layer that we just added, I'm going to drag it onto the same layer as the first one. And then what happens is, if you notice that name change, now it's a video group. And over here, it's grouped together as a video group. So it's all connected. So now that we've done that one time, Photoshop knows that I want to treat this layer as a video group, meaning I want to have a bunch of different layers on this thing and treat them as frames of animation. So now when I click a new layer, it'll default to adding it to the same video group, which I just created, which is nice. That's about like the only thing that Photoshop helps you out with. So now we've got 3 layers here, 3 frames. So I can draw more stuff on all these different frames, and now it plays like crazy. Jesus, that's fast. So the next thing I want to show you is this little button over here. If we click that, we can open up the set timeline frame rate. It defaults to 30 frames per second. I'm going to want to change that to 24, which is the standard frame rate for animation. So now it plays a little slower. And of course, these are all 1 frame long, and we can change them however we want. They can be as long or short as we want them to be. So I can make this 5 frames, whatever. Make this 2 frames, make this 1 frame. So we get some jittery motion here. So the next helpful thing that Photoshop has, which I was also surprised that this was built in, is an onion skin functionality. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, then I'll explain exactly what this is doing. So the onion skin just shows you the previous drawing. And there are some parameters in here that you can mess around with. Right now, it default sets to, you can see 1 frame before the frame you're on currently and 1 frame after. So I always set this to 2, because I usually animate on 2s, meaning each frame is actually stretched out to 2 frames. So when I'm on this center frame here, which is this guy right there, I can see what happened before that drawing and what happened after. And so that basic premise of like the onion skinning is essentially simulating drawing traditionally on paper over like a light box, which is how you do it if you weren't using a computer or anything. So the onion skin just helps guide you through your animation as you're planning it. If these were like the keyframes, right, and I wanted to place a frame in between here, I wanted it to go from this starting point to this point here, right there, but I wanted a frame in between. Now I know where to place it. So now if I turn my onion skin off, wait, shit, how do I turn the onion skin off? Right there. My God. Now I've got that little looping animation here. So the only tool I use to help me inside of Photoshop with the animation is this extension called animate. Let me go ahead and get rid of all this stuff. It's called animate. and I believe it's made by a French animator, although I'm not sure. I actually think it's called Animate 2, and it's an extension, a free extension you can load into Photoshop that all it does really is help clean up the functionality of the timeline a little bit so that you're not wasting so much time adding all of these frames like that and having to manually stretch them down and place them onto the same video layer every time. Because that stuff really builds up. You know, it takes a few seconds each time to do that. Super annoying, ruins the flow if you're really getting into something. So I already have it loaded in here. It's this toolbar right here vertically. That's Animate 2. So I pretty much only use it for two little pieces of basically they're like little shortcuts. The rest of the stuff, I mean, it's helpful, but I don't really jump into it that much. The only thing I use this for is right here, these two little icons that say 1 and 2. Those are hot like shortcuts for creating frames at either a length of 1 frame or 2 frames. So if I click the 1 frame button, it automatically makes a 1 frame layer for me. And then again, you still have to, if this is not already a video group, you have to drag this onto itself. And now Photoshop recognizes that you're trying to build out on 1 layer or 1 video group. But now I can populate the timeline really quickly without having to stretch all these things back down on top of each other. You can also do 2 frames at a time here. I wish that you could do 3, because sometimes I'll animate on 3s. Sometimes you need to stretch the frame out longer, but it just takes an extra second to take your 2 frame layer here and stretch it out 1 more. So Animate, super great to just be able to populate your timeline full of frames really, really quickly. The other thing that's super helpful, just a second ago, I was fumbling around trying to figure out how to turn the onion skin on and off. It's really annoying to have to go and click that every time you want to turn it off, because when you're animating, you're constantly turning that on and off, checking where you're going. So let's put a couple drawings in here really quick just so I can demonstrate this functionality in Animate. We've got 2 drawings here back to back. This button right here, right beneath the trash bin, turns on and off the onion skin. Just by touching it, it toggles it on and off, and that's super helpful. Just because it does what Photoshop should have had stock. That's basically what Animate is just like the bare bone tools that already should have been available but aren't. Hopefully, you know, as more and more people animate inside of Photoshop, hopefully things change a little bit. And, you know, Adobe will start building a little more functionality into it, making it a little bit more robust. But until that happens, this is pretty much all we have. That being said, you know, when working inside of Photoshop for animation, there are no tools to help you other than what I just showed you. It all lends itself to the style of hand-drawn, frame-by-frame animation, like traditional animation. And that's the type of work that I love doing. That's really the only type of animation that I do. So that's why I love working with this program so much. If you're interested in more like motion graphics type stuff or tweening, this might not be the tool for you to use, because you can't very easily, like if I drew this circle right here, I couldn't have it move perfectly across the canvas beyond just like duplicating that frame. If I Command J and just move it by hand, like there's no way to automate movements inside like that, which sucks. But you know, that's part of the thing with Photoshop, just to be honest. So it lends itself to just traditional animation. If that's something you're into, then this could be a really powerful tool for you. So those are pretty much the only tools that I use when I'm building animation inside of Photoshop. So I guess from now I'll go ahead and do a quick little demo and show you like how I would work in building something simple. So I'm gonna create a frame here, set it to 2 frames long, and I'll just draw something like a mouth. Yeah, just draw a little mouth. Give him some lips, and teeth, and maybe a tongue. One of the reasons why I moved over to Photoshop is just the drawing functionality is just so great. Working in Flash, like I like Flash and everything, or as it's called now, animate CC, but I just don't like drawing inside of Flash. I hate it. So Photoshop, I've been using it for years just to illustrate. So that's part of the reason why I really wanted to transition over. Man, my computer sounds like it's going to blow up. All right, now I've got my starting point, right? The mouth is open. I'm just going to make the mouth flap open and shut, just like he's talking or chewing or something. So now I've got my next frame right beside it. I'm going to go ahead and turn the onion skin on so I can see my previous drawing and reference it. So that's a keyframe right here. I guess my other keyframe would be the mouth completely shut. So referencing this previous drawing, I'm going to draw the lips closed here. Get his teeth back in there. Actually, shit. Let me make these go down a little further. There we go. So I'm going to stretch this guy back down here so that all I'm previewing when I press play are these two frames. So now I've got this really choppy little motion here. But, it's getting there. It's, I've got those two frames in there. Just need to build it up a little bit. So now I might need a frame in between these two. Little in between here. So I'm going to turn on my onion skin so I can see both of them. And I'll draw a mouth that's in between these two shapes. Actually, might need to be a little wider than that. There we go. Put his teeth in. And let's see, where's his tongue over here? So his tongue would be higher up. Cool. Go ahead and shade in the dark part of his mouth. So now it's starting to look a little better. It's obviously lopsided. If I wanted him to open his mouth back up, I need to duplicate this frame and put it on the other side of this one, of the closed mouth. So an easy way to do that is on your keyboard, if you hold the Alt or Option button and then click the frame that you want to duplicate, and then you can just drag it anywhere you want, and it'll duplicate that frame for you and put it right wherever you were positioning it. So now I've got that same frame over here, and if I play it back, now it looks a little bit better, right? Let's see, I'm gonna add a couple frames here just to ease the motion in and out so it doesn't feel quite as clunky or robotic. Hopefully it'll feel a little more organic. So I'm gonna add a quick breakdown drawing here, just kind of slightly exaggerating this stretch of the mouth so that it'll hold its position open just a little bit longer and give us like a little bit more of a sense of snappiness, I guess, and probably look a little more rubbery as well. So there's his lips here. His teeth would move up just a little bit since his mouth is opening up just a tiny bit more. His tongue would also come down just a hair. Cool. That looks all right. Fill this guy in real quick. And I'm also going to add a breakdown at the end of this too, where I exaggerate the squash a little bit more So it's going to get just a bit more squashed, a little thinner, a little wider. Stretch his lips. Go. So now I've got my 2 breakdowns, which should help the motion just a little bit. Yeah, it feels better. One thing I'm going to do, though, real quick, one little quick tip. If you want something to feel like super snappy, sometimes you got these breakdowns, right, on both of these extremes. So this is my keyframe. This is an extreme, and this is an extreme, meaning those are the 2 main poses in this animation. And I've got this in between here, and I've got these 2 breakdowns, one on each side. So if I want this thing to really snap really quickly, I'm going to just try getting rid of the in-between altogether. So it feels like way more cartoony already. I kind of like that better. I think I might leave that in-between out of there. Let me see, the only other thing I could do, it still doesn't, it feels a little too like snappy. Right as, I'm going to replace essentially that in between with a sort of like an exaggerated smear frame. So his mouth is going to open up just a little bit more here. So it's kind of an in between, but it's favoring the closed position. And it's like he's trying to open his mouth, but his teeth are still going to be connected. And that way it'll exaggerate the motion a lot more. And it'll make it feel snappy without making it feel like too overly choppy, because it feels a little choppy right now. So his teeth are stretching, everything's stretching as he's fixing to open up his mouth. Okay. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. So now that we have our little animation here, it's all in one video group. If we compress this down over on the layers, so over here it shows it vertically instead of horizontally, which can be kind of confusing, but it's the same thing as over here. These are all the same drawings. Layer 1 would be my first drawing, so if I toggle that on and off, I can get rid of it, change the opacity. I can even move it around where, oops, that's the background. I can even move the mouth around wherever I want. Doesn't matter. So if I compress this video group, I can move the whole video group as long as I'm just moving the whole video group. I can move it around wherever I want, and it'll move all of the frames together in the same spot. So that's super helpful. Like, where it was positioned, I think right here, maybe it's not completely centered. You don't have to worry about that. You can just jump into the animation, Command T the whole video group to transform it and move it around, and I can move it wherever I want. And if I want one guy right there, if I want that in the corner, I can move that in the corner. I can also take this whole video group, Command J, and duplicate the whole thing, and now you'll see that I have a copy of that on top of itself in default, and I can transform that thing and move it over here. It'll all be the same animation. So if I look at in this project file of another animation I did, I'm sure you can see how crazy the timeline all these frames can get. But when I first jumped into Photoshop, I was just doing small little experiments. I wasn't comfortable in taking on anything super serious, just little small things. But eventually got comfortable with it, and it became the only tool I use for hand-drawn animation. But yeah, like just, take it baby steps, one step at a time, just have some fun, experiment, and then you'll get faster at it, you'll get more comfortable, and then you can start doing more complex stuff. I might do a video later on where I sort of jump in more depth to some of my project files. But yeah, I hope this helped. I mean, Photoshop can be a great tool, although it's very unintuitive and clunky at times for animation. You can use all these gorgeous brushes and filters and effects, and you can paint and do all this crazy stuff that you can't do in a lot of other 2D animation software. So give it a try. Yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. I hope this helps.